In today's show, I'm joined by Corey Tulaba of No Ceilings, the NBA Draft Dude. We're going to talk a couple of prospects that he likes, or one that he likes, one that he doesn't like that much, or as much as others, plus some top fives for the NBA Draft. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com and at Yahoo Sports Australia. And you can find me on Twitter, as always, at redrock_bball and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and we're available on all platforms. We are getting stuck into NBA draft stuff. There was a mock draft a couple of days ago. Went through a bunch of NBA draft prospects yesterday with Ben Pfeiffer, or 2 days ago with Ben Pfeiffer, actually. And yesterday we talked comparisons with Mitch Casey. Today, we're looking at top fives, top five shooters, top five defenders, top five passers, as well as a little bit more in-depth on a couple of prospects as well. Before we get into that, though, I've got a favor to ask you blokes. And you Sheilas, of course, if you guys want to help out this podcast and the network, we've got a survey. It's at lockedonpodcasts.com/survey. Everyone who completes it, it's only short. If you complete it, you go into the draw to win one of 10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. So, lockedonpodcasts, with an S at the end, .com/survey. Go fill out the survey, help us out, maybe win yourself a gift card. Enough mucking around. Let's start talking NBA draft. Let's get Corey in here. All right, so let's bring him in now. First time guest on the podcast. You may have seen him on No Ceilings, which I do encourage you guys to check out. All the shows they have there, audio and video wise. Corey Tulaba, welcome to Locked On Fantasy Basketball.
Hey man, thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be here to talk some NBA draft.
We're a couple of weeks out from the NBA draft, so we're going through prospects on all of these shows and talking about players that people are higher on, people are lower on. We're going to do something a little bit different with you today. We are going to talk about a couple of players there in that regard and then some top five lists as well. So we might as well just crack straight in here and have a look at a guy that you are higher on than the consensus, and that is Gabriele Procida, the 20-year-old 6'8" wing from Bologna played for Bologna over in Italy. Just one quick question, Corey. Now, I know that, Bologna is in Italy, but you guys in America, you would say that word as bologna if you were talking about meat, wouldn't you? Why? Why? There's no why. Why is it bologna? It makes no sense.
I wish I could tell you the English language in and of itself doesn't make any sense. So you're preaching to the choir here.
So Gabriele Procida from Bologna apparently is here. So let's talk about him. Probably, I would expect him to be a second-round player in the draft. Like, how much higher are you on him than maybe that consensus?
I would feel comfortable taking him, in like the 15 to 20 range.
Okay.
So probably, I guess, a little bit higher. I mean, for me, like, once I really started diving into his film, and I was familiar with him prior to this year, but once I really got deep into his film this season, I was like, he might be one of the best international prospects in the entire draft. And just because of his size and the ability to shoot the ball, there are just things that he did on the floor that I was like, this guy looks like a guy that's going to play a long time in the NBA. So I think he's really exciting as a prospect and somebody that, again, like I would have no problem taking pretty early, like, I'm a Bulls fan. Like, if the Bulls swung for him at 18, I would feel completely confident in it.
So we look at the numbers. He only played 19 minutes a game, but the shooting numbers are all fantastic. You're 52% from the field, 38% from three, hit 78% from the line. He got to the line a lot. He attempted 53% of his shots are from three. His true shooting was 66%. Like, these are all gigantic numbers. Unfortunately, a lot of the other numbers are pretty small, like 0.7 assists, 0.3 blocks, 3 rebounds. He did have some good steal numbers. So the question everyone asks, whether this is right or wrong, is international prospects, European prospects, like, are they going to be able to defend NBA athletes? Like, How does he go on that end?
I mean, it's going to be a process early on for sure. But one of the things that's for me is encouraging is he's just so big. Like, he's 6'8" out on the floor, and he's got big, broad shoulders. So, as he continues to mature out on an NBA floor, I look at him and I go, like, is he the type of guy that's going to be able to play in a playoff setting? Is he going to be able to get played off the floor physically? And to me, the answer is no. And then one of the things that pops about him that I'm sure we'll touch on is, like, he's one of the best athletes for a wing in this draft. So he's got the athleticism, he's got the frame. I think he's going to put on good weight when he gets in an NBA strength and conditioning program. And I think he moves well enough laterally. So will it be a process early on? Yeah, and that's true for the vast majority of rookies. But he's a guy that I think just because of the size, the athleticism, and the frame, in the long run, I think he's going to be able to be on a floor in big moments. Now, I'm not saying that he's going to be the guy you stick on Jason Tatum in the fourth quarter of a playoff game, but I don't necessarily know if teams are going to be able to hunt him in the long term in the playoffs either. So I think that's where I'm at with him defensively.
What about, outside of the shooting? Like, because that all looks really good. Like, that's impressive at this point. What else offensively does he do? Can he dribble? Can he pass? Can he be a secondary ball handler? Is he a guy that is only a catch and shoot player? Can he create shots for himself? What's his other role outside of being, hey, he's a really good shooter and he's got this good size?
I think that one, he's going to be excellent in transition. I think he's just an absolute beast out in the open floor. I think he's got really good timing going for offensive rebounds. Like, if you watch him, he's got like just an entire highlight reel full of like monster tip dunks. And I think that he's a good off-ball mover, so that while he's not going to be a guy who creates a ton of his own offense at the next level, ideally, I think that like he can get his own shot in the same way that, maybe not JJ Redick, he's one of the best ever, but like guys who are a Bogdanovich, guys who move off ball, get open that way, running off pin down screens, floppy action. I think that's how ideally he's going to score the vast majority of his points, but he has also flashed some pretty impressive stuff with the ball in his hands, step backs and whatnot. So I do think he's got some potential there as well. With him, and the reason, I say I feel comfortable taking him post lottery, I don't project him to be like a first or second option necessarily, but I just think that he's got such a clear path to be like a guy who you could probably rely on for third option scoring as a role player, playing off of your stars. So maybe guys like Luka or Jason Tatum, guys who are going to be able to create a little bit on the wing. I think he could pair next to them really seamlessly. And whether that is developing some of that on-ball stuff or just being a really, really important guy who does stuff off ball and doesn't need high usage to still contribute and get points, I think he can develop kind of a little bit of both.
Before we get on to the player that you're a little bit down on compared to a lot of others, I've got a question that I have to ask everyone who comes on this podcast when it's the day that I've got to do this ad read, and that is, can you fix your own car?
Absolutely not.
Thank you. You're the same as me, but there are plenty of us out here who listen to this podcast who can. And if you are looking for parts for your car, why would you bother going to a local chain auto parts store? It seems like a waste of time. Well, it is. It seems like a waste of money. It absolutely is. When you can get all of those parts for your car for cheaper, reliably, at Rock Auto, an online family business serving auto parts customers for over 20 years. Whether it's brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, or even new carpet, Rock Auto has everything that you would need for your car or truck. So head to rockauto.com and check out that vast array of parts that you might need for your car or truck. And in their How Did You Hear About Us box, write Locked On, so that they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need, rockauto.com. All right, the guy that you are a little bit down on in comparison to others is Kendall Brown, who there was a little bit of an error with him in terms of he was initially announced as taking his name out of the draft, and I didn't see the correction from that, so I thought he was out. Then you informed me, no, he's actually staying in the draft, a 6'8", 19-year-old wing from Baylor, and I just noticed I spelled Baylor wrong on that graphic, which is annoying me, but that's all good. All right, Kendall Brown, probably being mocked in a lot of places in the teens, early 20s. What are you down on with him?
I think the main reason I'm down, and it's not that I don't think he's going to be a player that could, return, potential top 25 value, he certainly has some strengths. But I think with him, what happened was like he was initially projected as this, back end of the first round, potential early second round guy. And he came out of the gates and had a couple of really big games very early on in his season, where he flashed some things like he had a 10 assist game. He was shooting the ball really well, but it was on really low volume. So he was super efficient. And as the season went on, you saw less and less of the things that made him really intriguing early on, and maybe more of the things that made you say, oh, this is why he was projected to be the back end of the first round guy and not the guy who moved himself up into like the top 5 to 10 range. Now, he's kind of leveled out since then. A lot of people have dropped him back down. You're seeing him, as you said, maybe in the late teens through even the 30 range, depending on the board that you go to. So it's not that I think he's not kind of going back into his spot, but throughout the process, he has such intriguing tools because he's one of the best athletes in the class. He's really agile, light on his feet. His shot looks clean. It looks pretty good. And like I say, he's a pretty decent passer. He's had some moments there, but there's just something about his aggressiveness on both ends that leaves a lot to be desired. It's just defensively, he should be this like just absolute lockdown guy on ball. And I think he's okay there, but he's kind of fine not being super aggressive and just kind of giving his guys space, not getting in their shirt. Off ball, I think he's young, so it's normal, but he's prone to getting back cut a lot. Probably not as impactful on that end as you would expect given his athleticism. And then, the shooting is he just really just only shoots him when he is wide open. Like there's nothing where a guy's running at him and he's really going to put it up. So even some of the percentages, it's like, all right, that's going to be lower if this guy's actually going to shoot shots where he's not, doesn't have 10 feet of space, because very rarely in the NBA is he going to get that. So I just think that given his tools, his athleticism, I think a lot of people are going to look at him as this guy with this massive potential. And to me, it's, while the tools may say that, is he going to be aggressive enough to actually fulfill it? Or is he going to be like fellow Aussie Josh Green in Dallas, where he's got all the tools, great defender, but is going to kind of struggle to find consistent minutes out on a floor on a good team. So I just, for me, I think that he could definitely be a guy who returns good value for a team. I just think I would rather bet and swing on some of the other guys that I personally have ranked ahead of him.
Yeah, I think it's really important to mention about the shooting as well, because you look at it and it goes, 58% field goal percentage. Okay, 34% from three. That's okay, but you're right, the attempts aren't there. Like only 18% of his shots are from three, despite hitting 34%. And it's just not taking shots at all. Like his usage is at 17%? Yeah, 17% his usage is, so he's just not a guy that is taking those shots despite this highly efficient looking line that he's got. So digging into context and looking at the fact that he is taking only those wide open shots might lead you to believe that he's maybe a better shooter than he actually is, which is going to be something that becomes a problem in the NBA. And when you look at his free throws, where he's at under 69% there, somewhat of a concern, again, of him not having necessarily the greatest touch. And then you bring up those defensive concerns. So I was a little bit, I don't know where to fit on him. I like the size of him, and having that sort of wing size is important. But does that trump production or projected production and projected shooting? Do you hope that can change, or is that more of a fait accompli that he's just going to be this really reluctant shooter? Do you see anything to make you think that maybe there's a spark or something that can change in his game, or was this opportunity for him in Baylor the chance to show that and he just shied away from it?
Well, he's young, so there's definitely a chance for him to kind of mature and grow into himself. And I think if he finds himself in the right situation, I think he definitely could, be more of that player that you would hope to get by taking him in the top 20. If he plays off of a Luka or a LeBron or somebody like that, who's really going to take advantage of the fact that he is an excellent cutter, he is really strong out in transition, he is going to be a kind of a lob threat with his athleticism at the hoop, then there are absolutely paths for him to become a contributing player. But outside of him just being kind of an off-ball role player, I'm not really sure I see it. Even at the combine, he shot the ball really well there in some of the drills, but it's there's no defenses there. So he has all the time in the world, and to just be comfortable and shoot his shots, it's not telling the story of what he's like. The 34%, and that's, you mentioned earlier, he was at like close to 50% at some points of the season. So he just, went on a cold streak on top of it. And again, it's mindset. Mindset's so hard to predict. Like, is it going to be maturity? Is it going to be the right coach who gets in his ear, the right developmental staff? That's what makes the draft tricky. You don't know the answer to that question until after the draft and you actually figure out where these guys go. So for him, I think to figure that stuff out, it's going to be kind of context dependent.
One last thing on Brown is you talk about a cold streak. In the middle of the year, there was a 16-game streak, and he hit 1-3 in 16 games. Like, that's crazy. There were some games he didn't even attempt any, and there was a bunch of them where he just went 0 of 1, but he didn't hit a single three he hit 1-3 in between the games starting November 25th against VCU. That was November 25th. He hit 1-3 against Alcorn State on December 20th, and the next time he hit a 3 was January the 31st against West Virginia. So 1-3 in 2 months he hit. So yeah, those percentages might be somewhat misleading. Let's move now, Corey, to talk about some top 5 lists and some interesting names that have appeared on your list here. Now, these of course don't mean that you would take these guys in this order necessarily. We're looking at single skills. Right. And the top guys that you think at these particular skills. So we're going to do top 5 shooters, top 5 passers, and top 5 defenders. We'll go straight in here to talk about the top 5 shooters in this draft. Number 1, who is it?
That would be Youngjoong Lee from Davidson, which, is a name that, unless you're pretty deep into the draft, you're probably not super familiar with. But to me, he is, just from a strictly shooting perspective, to me, I think he's the clear-cut best shooter in the draft.
So being that guy, being that number 1 shooter, like, what stops him from being a first-round player? Or even maybe he's not even a draftable player. Like, is everything else just completely disastrous?
No, it's not. Like, offensively, I think he has a real impact on the game. He's not one of the shooters like who's doing a whole bunch of off-the-bounce stuff. He's much more in the vein of like a Duncan Robinson type off-ball shooter. But besides his shooting, he's so good at leveraging the threat of his shot to make really smart cuts. He's one of the best cutters and finishers in the draft. And then he's also a pretty good passer. He's got really good feel with the ball, so he'll come off those handoffs that you used to see like J.J. Redick and Joel Embiid or DeAndre Jordan run, where he comes off, uses the threat of 2 guys jumping out on him for the shot to hit the roll man. He can see most of the floor, hit weak side. So offensively and as a shooter, he's really good as one of these guys who's going to be able to open up your offense and space the floor. The reason that I think most people don't have him as a first round guy is there are questions about him defensively. Is he going to be able to stick with the kind of wings that NBA players he's going to face on a nightly basis in the NBA? Is he going to be able to handle the physicality? Those are the question marks. I have him in the 30 to 40 range on my board, just because I think the guys like him, if you go down the line, they always kind of find a role somewhere, even if it's not on the team that drafts them. They spend some time in the G League, and eventually, because they're such a good shooter, they find a spot in the league. So that's why I have him number 1. He's just stroke.
In terms of shooting, we can compare to, let's say, Duncan Robinson as an elite shooter who's got a lot of deficiencies, and he worked out in the NBA. But then there was a guy, say, last season who was a pretty good shooter. I don't know if you class him as the same level, Jordan Shackle, who really just couldn't stick. He did sign with the Wizards at one point, but played 4 games and shot 9% in those games. So, like, what level of shooter, how does he compare to, say, Duncan Robinson or to Shackle?
I would say he's more in the Duncan Robinson vein. Like Corey Kispert, like those kind of guys. I'd say he's more on that tier. And, while Duncan Robinson made it, you also saw, because of those deficiencies that he shares with Youngjoong Lee, he wasn't able to really get consistent minutes in, the most important series in the playoffs for the Miami Heat. So, but I would say he's more comparable to a guy like Robinson. He's big, same kind of size. Probably a little bit more potential as a passer, but Duncan Robinson's pretty good in that regard as well.
After number 1 there with Lee, you've got Malachi Branham, then AJ Griffin, Jabari Smith, and Tevin Brown to round out your top 5. interesting to see Branham there, who took a lot of long twos in college. Do you see that being something where he's able to take that out and become this high-level three-point shooter, or is he going to be stuck in that mid-range, which, making them, we've seen the success DeMar DeRozan, Chris Paul, Devin Booker have had in taking tough long twos? Is he a guy that will stick to that area, or will he take that volume and translate that into a high-volume three-point shooting situation?
I don't think he's going to eliminate the two-point shot from his game at all, but I do think you'll see a higher uptick of three-point shots at the next level. I think that I would compare him a little bit to a guy like Chris Middleton, who a lot of those mid-range shots are kind of those shots that you need guys to take at the end of a shot clock. You need guys who can just, sometimes you got to come off a screen and get a bucket. And that's the kind of shooter that he really was last year. But he's also a really efficient three-point shooter. And what I love about him is he doesn't need to have the ball in his hands to be effective as a shooter. He is shot ready from behind the arc, on the catch. Whenever EJ Liddell's down on the block and he's out on the perimeter, like, just freeze frame it and you'll see him with his hands out, just ready to hop right into the shot when he gets the ball. So I think that he's one of those guys who's going to have like a healthy diet between the twos and threes. And eventually he might be a guy you could go to at the end of games to get shots in those tough mid-range areas that you see from some of the top scorers.
Before we get into the rest of our top 5 lists, I'm going to tell you guys about Built Bar, because they've got a new product out. It is Built Bar Caramel Brownie. Don't you love a chewy, chocolatey brownie? Well, I guess most people do. And if you do love that, with caramel added in, Built Bar has you covered. We know that protein bars in the past have tasted like garbage. They taste like shit. No one wants to eat them, but we do it because they're healthy. Or we reach for a candy bar, which is unhealthy. Well, Built Bar will merge those two together. Low calories, low fat, low sugar, but high protein, and it tastes delicious. What more could you ask for when you're looking for a healthy treat, a healthy snack, or something after you've worked out to get that protein in? And these caramel brownie bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. What more could you ask for? Again, Built Bar just knocking it out of the park every single time here. All of these Built Bars are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits as well. There are a million reasons, and a Built Bar, I challenge you again to tell me what the million reasons are, because it seems like too many. But anyway, there are a lot of reasons to try Built Bars. Number 1 is the taste, number 2 is the healthy stuff, and number 3 is that I'm telling you about it, and you can get them for 15% off by using the code LOCKED15. So head to built.com, use the code LOCKED15, LOCKED15. You'll save 15% off your order. Built Bar is built different. Top 5 passes. Corey, when you sent me this list, I looked at it. I went, all right, it's pretty interesting. I've talked in my mock drafts about, hey, where are the point guards? Where are the point guards? Where are the passes? Where are they? They're not here. And if you're looking for those guys, like, you're the Wizards and the Knicks sitting at 10 and 11. You go, Jesus, we need a point guard, and there's no one there. And I think this list would suggest that maybe that would be accurate, because some of the names on this list aren't guys who are going to go high. Most of them aren't really point guardy sort of players necessarily. It's a very intriguing list. Number 1 is Jalen Williams, the shooting guard wing from Santa Clara. You've got number 2, Alondes Williams. Dalen Terry, who I talked about a couple of days ago with Ben, who has some interesting statistical profiles with his passing and the really unbelievably low usage, which is weird for a college player. Usman Dieng, who I talked about as well, who's like a 6'9" forward. And then you got Trevion Williams. So, when we talk about these being the best 5 passes according to you, is it because this class is just incredibly weak with passing talent? And we've had these guys like Cade Cunningham and LaMelo Ball the last couple of years, and Josh Giddey, these really high-level passes. Is this class just incredibly weak, or am I undervaluing these guys?
I think the class is very weak when it comes to passers. You mentioned the issues with point guards not being a strength of the class at all. But I do think that some of these guys do offer real passing chops in an NBA context. So when I was going down my list of passers, it could have been easy to just kind of go with some of the point guards that we have for point guard's sake. But I look at certain guys on this list and try to figure out how they're going to play in an NBA context. And I think I could see them being important playmakers, passers, given their role that I'm projecting them as.
So, okay, so who's the guy that out of this group? Because again, not many of these players to me are guys that you're going to say, all right, go out there and run an offense, right? Who's the guy that's most likely to be able to be that player who can merge? There's not going to be Trae Young or Luka Doncic or Ja Morant. They're not going to be that guy, most likely, unless something weird happens. But who's the guy that you're going to feel more comfortable, throwing multiple passes per game and actually having a control of the offense?
I would say Jalen Williams, which is why I have him at number one. He's a wing, 6'5", 6'6", 7'2.5" wingspan, but he really ran the offense for Santa Clara this season. And just as a passer, he really has a really high IQ, and he made some really, really high level reads. Like, I highlighted one of them on my Twitter the other day that is one of the best passes you'll see from anybody in any class. Like, he came, attacked baseline from the left corner, went baseline, and 3 guys collapsed on him. He read the guy cheating to the opposite corner and wrapped around the defender with a live dribble left-handed pass all the way to the top of the key on the money. That's the kind of stuff he's capable of, but he's also capable of playing really slow with pace and playing out of the pick and roll, getting guys on his hips, and then playing cat and mouse with the big man, understanding where the help is going to come from, and then he's got to make reads based off of that. So, I look at him and I say, this is a guy that I could see going to the NBA and actually be given real legitimate ball handling, playmaking duties at the next level.
The other name on this list that I really wanted to highlight is Ousmane Dieng, who I had sort of high in my first mock draft and then dropped him down. I was a little bit discouraged. And then I spoke with Ben Pfeiffer on Monday, and he was like, no, I really like this guy. Now you're putting him here in this top 5 passes. So maybe I need to reassess my views on Dieng, who had some struggles obviously in Australia, but really stepped it up in the last 10 or so games, I think, of the season. What sort of passing are we talking about here? Is this a Kyle Anderson type of passer, a guy that you want the ball in the hands of more than that? What part of his game is this the best part of Dieng's game?
I think it's the best part of his game because it to me, when you're watching him on the floor, this is the thing that you go, oh, wow, this is what differentiates him from other prospects, because he's, legit 6'9", 6'10", long, and there's just something innate by the way that he reads the game. You could tell that he doesn't need to be told where the ball needs to go. You could tell that he sees the floor and he understands where the ball needs to go based on how the defense is shifting in their help. So, he'll consistently make plays out of the pick and roll that really, really impress you when you watch him, and it's not rushed. It's there. He plays with pace of a guy who's, been running multiple pick and rolls a number of times. So I think that his height certainly helps, but he just has a touch and a feel for passing that is really, really impressive. And I think that if he had done it for a more prolonged stretch, as you said, he really only came on that, last 10 or so games. I think that he probably would have been higher on my list, but and I also think that it's going to take him a little bit of time at the next level, because I think he really needs to work on his frame to get there. But I really see him as a guy that, while you're not going to give him like Luka amount of reps, eventually he could be your secondary playmaker where he could substitute for your primary playmaker on a lot of occasions.
Let's lastly go here into the top 5 defenders. A lot more familiar names on this list, Corey. At number 1, you've got Chet Holmgren, followed by Mark Williams, then Keegan Murray, Dyson Daniels, and EJ Liddell. A couple of things that stand out to me here is, Chet, yes, I fully agree with this as him being this really top-level defender. Jalen Duren not there, but you've got Mark Williams ahead of him. Okay. Keegan Murray's a name that probably surprises me, and the other thing that surprises me is the absence of Jeremy Sohan. So talk to me about why you wouldn't have Sohan in this top 5 group, first of all.
He would be my 6th guy in this group,
okay,
and I completely understand the argument to have him in the top 5. It's very close, which is something is a theme in this entire draft. The rankings and the differentiators are very close. I love Sohan, so for me to sell you on why he shouldn't be here is not something I necessarily want to do. But the reason I have Liddell there instead, because I think defensively they're going to offer a lot of the same things, is that I think that Liddell is probably going to be a better rim protector as a small ball 5 than Sohan will be. I think he's got a little bit more of that like explosive vertical pop. His mom was a volleyball player. You see that in the way that you can kind of just one step vert into, sending a shot. But Sohan, he's a great defender. And, you saw his versatility by being able to switch onto bigs. And then, he's hanging with RJ Davis in the biggest possession of the game in the tournament against North Carolina. So he's certainly somebody worthy of being on the list.
Keegan Murray put up some really big defensive stats last season in Iowa. I wasn't convinced that those stats and his defense was necessarily real or going to be that level of translatable into the NBA. But you've got him here as the third best player, you think, in this class. So you obviously have a differing opinion to me on those defensive numbers and the way that he looked there. So is he a guy that you throw out onto the opponent's best wing and go, hey, go guard Durant, LeBron, Paul George, Kawhi? Like, is he that guy to you that you can throw out onto the team's best wing?
I think eventually,
Okay.
a few years into his career when he develops physically and gets a handle on the speed of the game, I think that's kind of the goal with him. Obviously, early on, that's going to be incredibly tough. But I think that if he were to be put in those situations, he would definitely be a guy that is prepared for the moment. But when I look at Keegan, I look at a guy who I'm not comparing him strictly from like a play style, but kind of the mentality and the impact I see him having is like Al Horford-ish, where, it's not necessarily the most flashy thing. One of the guys at the No Ceiling staff, Tyler Metcalf, he likes to refer to Keegan as a guy, it's death by 1,000 cuts, where he just wears on you. And that's on both ends. And yeah, he's got, big steal and block numbers. But the way he approaches the game, he fits the prototype, of the modern NBA wing who's going to be able to move up and down a lineup and is going to be versatile. I think that he's a guy who still has room to grow, even though he's a little bit older. So I just love how he fits the trajectory of where the league is going. I love his mentality. I saw him from behind the bench this year, and, I was watching for all the little intangibles that you go when you see somebody live. And all the intel that I've gotten personally from asking league sources, it all checks out in a big way that this is a kid who just is going to do the right things and be a really high impact guy. So all of those things combined are the reasons why I'm really high on Keegan Murray and the impact he's going to have on that side of the floor.
Last question before I let you go. I'll probably get the most feedback about this guy, which is normal because he's considered the number 1 or number 2 prospect in this draft, and that's Chet Holmgren. And the number one thing, obviously, I'll get about is that his weight. We're not going to talk about that now. But is it people saying he's not going to be able to play in the NBA? He's going to get played off the court in the playoffs because he's got no ability to switch out on the perimeter. So, can he switch on the perimeter?
For sure. For sure he can. Yeah. I actually just released a Chet Holmgren scouting video on my YouTube channel, the NBA Draft Dude. He's not as fluid as Evan Mobley is on the perimeter, but he's no slouch. And you'll see numerous occasions in my scouting video where he switched on to a really shifty guard and he's staying with him stride for stride. And even when he gets beat by an inch or two, a foot or even a foot, he has that absurd length to be able to recover and make the shot really hard. But outside of that, like if you put him in a drop coverage, he plays the cat and mouse game with the guard. If the guard wants to keep it, he can recover because he's so long. He's also smart enough to be able to fall back and recover down to the big. He can hard hedge, play out at the level of the screen. To me, he's kind of like it. By a wide margin, he's the best defender in the draft.
Yeah, I agree with you on the switching stuff, but the amount of people that have commented, he can't get out to the perimeter, he can only play as a rim protector, he's no way he's going to be able to last as a 4, he has to be a 5, and he's too weak, and I think that's not true, and I'm glad that you've backed me up on that one, and that, Corey, will do it for us today. Lastly, actually, tell people, where they can find you, what you do, videos, work, socials, all that stuff. Go with it. Give us the No Ceilings plug.
Yeah, well, on my personal Twitter, you can find me at Corey Tulaba, but you can also follow No Ceilings at No Ceilings NBA. You can head to NoCeilingsNBA.com. That's where we have our daily newsletter where we release content Monday through Friday. It's free if you subscribe. We also released our draft guide, which is the top 58 players on our personal board with scouting breakdowns, strengths and weaknesses, player comparisons with a merch line. And then you can follow the Draft Deck NBA Draft podcast, as well as the No Ceilings NBA Draft podcast as well.
Go and follow all those things. Go buy the No Ceilings Draft Guide. I bought it. It's great. Go and have a read of it. Go check out all the stuff that Corey and the team over there are doing. Corey, thanks for coming on Locked On Fantasy Basketball.
Hey, I really appreciate you having me on, and yeah, glad we got to chop it up and talk some big picture NBA draft stuff.
Absolutely. And that'll do it for me today. Don't forget to follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on the Odyssey app. If you're here on YouTube, drop your comments down below. What do you think about the top 5 passers, top 5 shooters, top 5 defenders that Corey has thrown out there? Go and leave your comments below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.